So thank you so much for joining us, Myrna, and the Women in AI podcast today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. I thought we could start I wanted to ask you to first kind of introduce yourself in your own words and kind of what your current role is at the moment.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Myrna Macgregor. I am the BBC lead on responsible AI and machine learning. And what this means in practice is kind of two things. Firstly, it's around developing a toolkit and resources and providing advice around issues to do with responsible AI in the BBC under the broad framework of what we call the BBC's machine learning engine principles. And the second is kind of a community education building piece. So it's kind of promoting a dialogue around responsible AI in the BBC, getting people to use and develop the tools that we're pulling together, and making sure that those responsibility issues are kind of key to how we're thinking about AI and ML more generally.
Wow, thanks for that overview. It must keep you extremely busy day to day, having to juggle both of those kind of main tasks. But what was it that kind of led you here? If you can you share a bit more about your in particular your career background and your kind of journey up until what led you to working now at the BBC?
Yeah, sure. So my background is in foreign policy and public policy, which is perhaps a little unorthodox for a transition into technology. I spent the first 11 years of my career working for the British Diplomatic Service, with some really fascinating postings and roles around transitions to democracy in Kosovo, working on the Middle East peace process in Israel, and doing some comments to the European Commission and the German Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So had some amazing adventures and experiences, but when it came to coming back to the UK, I decided to take a bit of a pivot. And I think the pivot was really driven by two things. So firstly, this kind of belief and passion around access to information. So working in foreign policy, you really see that access to information is a driver of progress, and it's a way of holding power to account. And the second sort of belief around that is that you see technology, and particularly AI and machine learning, increasingly mediating people's access to information. So I was really keen to work in the space and hopefully make a positive difference. So the BBC was a really great fit for that. The BBC, we have this amazing public service mandate to reach and connect with all audiences. You've got 9 out of 10 adults in the UK using the BBC each week. And with the sort of public broadcasting mandate, you also have this commitment to providing trusted and impartial news, both in the UK and internationally. We've got an audience of almost 470 million internationally. So I was lucky to find a role that was really thinking about how can we support this mission with technology, and how can we bring in our values and our strengths as an organization around connecting with audiences, all audiences, and around providing trusted and impartial news. How can we translate that into our technology choices as well? So that's kind of what responsible AI really means for us.
Oh wow, that's so interesting. Thanks for sharing some of your kind of motivations in terms of promoting the responsible use of technology. Yeah, it's fascinating. So since you have been in the role, then I think was it early 2019? Started?
Yeah, I think I started in the BBC 2018, worked on public policy and regulatory issues for the first year, and then transitioned to something more technology focused.
I see. So since you started then, you mentioned that you were kind of building the BBC's own framework, if you will, which I believe is called the Machine Learning Engine Principles and Checklist. So I just wanted to find out some more about how you first kind of started this project. How did you identify the exact kind of tenets that needed to be considered in terms of promoting the responsible use of AI?
Yeah, so it's been quite a journey. Where we started was back in 2017, before I joined, we made a public commitment to developing AI and machine learning technologies responsibly and in the public interest. And what these technologies are for us in practice are things around using AI in content creation or in production, and also using AI and ML to create new audience experiences, for example, personalization and recommendation. So we wanted a way of guiding development of these technologies. And where we started was thinking about what kind of guiding principles we wanted and needed in this space. So we came up with a set of 6 high-level principles, which we called the machine learning engine principles, and they were broadly around translating our current values into technology, so not reinventing the wheel in that space, thinking about that we would use these technologies to improve audiences' experience of the BBC, and also being transparent about where and how they were being used and how we were using data particularly. And then some principles around what we meant by responsibility in a more concrete way. So translating our editorial values, for example, broadening and not narrowing horizons. Some work around security, reliability, and fairness. And then a last one around kind of human review and having a human in the loop with these, with kind of deployment and development of technology. So once we had those guiding principles, we wanted to find a way of making them specific and actionable for teams, because it's really important that you don't kind of leave principles out there and expect people to sort of interpret them in their own way. You kind of got to give them a bit more of a framework. So that's where the accompanying checklist came about. And you kind of asked about how we figured out what needed to go in there. And so what we ended up doing was pulling together a really interdisciplinary group of around 40 people from around the BBC, not just technologists or data scientists, but a really diverse bunch of people from legal, from privacy, from editorial policy, from product backgrounds, to figure out what kind of questions we wanted teams and practitioners to ask themselves when they were designing ML engines, and providing a kind of self-audit tool that people could kind of work through. And one of the great things with having so many different perspectives is that we ended up with something really comprehensive that kind of accompanies you on almost every stage of your project, from the planning and the scoping to figuring out who else you needed to work with and what perspectives to bring in from across the BBC, particularly editorial perspectives. And then you've got some sections around building your model, testing your model, thinking about questions of bias, and then a review section at the end. So it's quite a comprehensive product, and that's really the benefit of bringing so many people into building something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that having, like you said, a holistic approach that kind of encompasses loads of different teams is so important. And then accounting for things, as you said, such as bias, and then kind of that final review process as well. Yeah, extremely important. It's amazing that you've managed to collaborate that all together into kind of 6 principles and kind of put them into practice.
Yeah, the checklist is a bit chunkier. So we started with 6 principles, and we've been through a few iterations of the checklist, and we're really excited that I think it's almost ready to publish, and because we've kind of tested it a few times. So I think the checklist is about 3.5, 4 pages. So it's a bit, there's a bit more to that.
So actually, taking this checklist then, I wanted to ask some more about what are the kind of main challenges you think about in terms of turning these ethical principles that you've developed and putting them actually into practice.
Yeah, I think the first challenge is this tension between being flexible and building something that works for a variety of teams and a variety of AI and machine learning applications. With the need to also be specific, because I mentioned kind of specific and actionable. So where is the balance between those two things? So you can kind of ask general enough questions that are going to be useful for different teams, but they're also specific enough that people can actually take them into account and action them. So I think that was a balance that was quite challenging, and we're probably still getting right. The second thing was thinking about how can we draw from best practice elsewhere. There's a number of responsible AI checklists out in the world, and it can feel a bit overwhelming, I suppose, as a practitioner when you're looking out and like, what should I use? What's the best way of building responsibly? So I think because we are quite a large organization, we had the benefit of being able to resource putting together something that felt tailored and specific to the BBC. I'm aware that we're quite lucky to be able to do that, and not every organization will be able to kind of develop something tailor-made for themselves, but I would definitely recommend trying to sift through what's there and pulling out the relevant bits to kind of what you're building. And as I mentioned, we're hoping to publish our checklist and approach too. So would love feedback on that, and if would be really open to people using and building on our approach as well. I think another challenge is around adoption. So you, as a responsible machine learning practitioner, build up something that you hope is helpful. Then you've got to kind of go out and sell it to teams to get them to use it and not bypass it. Or another risk is that they will use it, but only as kind of a review mechanism at the end of a project. So it's kind of a checkbox, and it's almost too late at that point to be making some of those decisions. So it's really kind of in the pitch of how you pitch this as a helpful intervention. And so it's around explaining that responsible AI is going to be successful AI. And by following this approach, you are building something that's going to work in the way that you intend for it to work and serve all of the users that you are supposed to be serving. And so that's kind of the opportunity section. And there's also kind of a bit of a sell around, and we're going to help you avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen others in the industry fall into. So it's that kind of twin sell, which I felt has been quite important in building that traction around it as a toolkit. And then I'd say the final challenge that we're kind of going through at the moment is how do we monitor whether it's working and what impact that it's having? So I think responsible AI is actually in those kind of micro decisions around who you consult and in which way you build. And it's very rarely at the end stopping and throwing something in the bin because it's not responsible. So how do you kind of track the pathways that you don't go down and the problems you avoid by making certain decisions? And I'd love to talk to anyone who's working in this area and compare notes, because we're definitely trying to develop how we measure how our work is kind of making a difference here. So that's really tough.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's one of the key things, isn't it? That actually, since our kind of attention in the field in artificial intelligence has been moving towards more kind of ethical, procedures and principles the past couple of years, now actually trying to monitor and measure that, like you said, is kind of the next challenge for things. So be really interesting to see where you go from here. And please do share with us once your checklist is published. We'll add that to the notes of this podcast so people can access that easily.
Yeah, it was one of the things we were talking about actually at the last Rework Summit, was kind of the newsworthiness of responsible AI versus all of the stories that you see about how it's gone wrong. And I think those stories are really valuable because they help incentivize more work in that space. So a really great example is, I guess, the work that Gender Shades did in really getting everyone to sit up and notice that there were issues to do with image recognition software and the data sets informing those. So I think bad news, like irresponsible AI stories, is helpful, but I think we as a community need to be more open about what our responsible AI journey looks like as well.
Yeah, making sure it's still in the forefront of everyone's minds. It's really important work that you're doing, so thank you. And so as an expert in the field now, starting out, like you said, in kind of the policy area, but moving more towards the technology side of things, if you had any tips or tricks for anyone who is starting out, whether that be in a particular career within the ethics field or within AI ethics or within machine learning as a practitioner, even, kind of what would it be if you could summarize that up into a few things?
Yeah, so my experience probably is more relevant to people looking to make a pivot into this area. So I think I would say you need to start with something that you're passionate within this field. And responsible AI is a big umbrella term. There are so many issues within it, so you could kind of go into a thematic responsible AI issue if you care strongly about bias or diversity or explainability. Or you could sort of look into specific applications that you want to make a difference on and start reading about those and networking and going to events and really building up your knowledge base about what's going on in that sector, because it's evolving so quickly. The second is look for opportunities to build, I guess, live skills in that area. So whether there are opportunities within your current role and that's kind of what I ended up doing from a policy perspective, was kind of deepening the amount of work I was doing on technology, data, machine learning, and AI policy, and using that as a springboard to build experience. And and expertise and credibility in that space. So if there is scope to get involved in machine learning projects in your current role or in a kind of extracurricular or even volunteering way, then that's a really great way of kind of building your CV towards a certain area. I think the final thing I'd say is think about what your USP, what perspective you're going to bring. I think this is particularly important in the ethics space. So the wonderful thing about ethics and the responsibility debate is that everyone gets to have a view on it, and the more interdisciplinary it is, the better, and the more perspectives that people bring into these issues, the stronger the field is going to be. So you kind of need to figure out what your experience is going to bring to this space. And if you're prepping for an interview or a kind of application, what it's going to bring to what that particular organization is looking to achieve. So I think I very much base my pivot on experience of public policy and an understanding of the kind of the drivers of change in society and policy, and the fact that regulation and scrutiny was likely coming to this space. So it'd be helpful to understand those things. And also on soft skills. So the role is really about bringing people together and figuring out lots of different perspectives and sifting through those and figuring out what the consensus and the way forward is. So often the soft skills you develop in other careers are extremely relevant to AI responsibility in tech careers as well.
Thank you for sharing those. There's some really, really valuable tips and tricks for everyone there. So finally, Myrna, thank you so much for joining us on the Women AI podcast again, and thank you for also joining us at the recent Deep Learning 2.0 Virtual Summit, where you participated in a panel on ensuring responsible AI. That was absolutely fantastic, and we hope to get that online soon as well, so everyone can have a listen into more about your work. But in the meantime, where can our listeners keep up with you? Are you on social media?
I'm not on social media, but feel free to drop me a LinkedIn message, and I'm super happy to chat to anyone about the work the BBC is doing in this space, or about the things we were chatting about in terms of transitions into careers in tech and technology ethics. I think it's really great work that you guys are doing in this space, and particularly kind of elevating the voices of women working in technology, and it's really refreshing and fun to hear about what other people are up to.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Myrna.
Thanks, Holly.
Thank you.